for water, and they gives them an insatiable thirst. Their intestines will dissolve and they'll die in the street. So that's one of our successes.
An Australian working on this vast rehousing project for the Hong Kong government, Ted Brown, guided me along Food Street.
Chinese delicacies, particularly for Chu Chow.
It's one of the dirtiest streets in a dirty city, actually.
Well, it's all a matter of relativity.
Many of the squalid little factories in this festering slum do produce food, usually those tasty delicacies all Chinese love, dim sum.
We're now walking through the main passageway that intersects through the city. The reason why these passageways was built was that the city, like all Chinese forts, and I believe probably in England, was built on a slope for sanitation reasons. So this allowed the residents to come in off Tung Tau Chun Road.
Now, this is the Regent Street of the Walled City, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, a shop. And 13 exits here,
yes,
just
yes.
in this one little
That's right, yes.
square here.
And some of these go halfway across the city. In the old days, the police used to tell us when there were a lot of pickpockets on Tung Tau Chun Road, that if they ran into here, they were impossible to find because once they got in this area,
Boom, 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 boom. Disappeared.
They never knew which exit he might have taken.
Any one of 14 levels he could be on.
Yes, yes.
But, I mean, those days, the police were quite worried about coming in here.
Yes, but that's in the early 1970s. But a lot of that changed about mid-1970 when the police started to patrol the Walled City known as. And from that date onwards, the situation of the Walled City has been no really different to anywhere else in Hong Kong.
I have to tell you, I had to pluck up my courage to come in here.
That's right, that's in the early 1970s.
And after an afternoon, we were run out. No nonsense, you know, acid or slashing or something. We were run out. You're telling me that's all changed now?
Yes, yes.
If I come in by myself now, I'm
No,
all
you're
right.
quite safe. In fact, the crime situation in the Walled City, we're told by the Kowloon City District Police, is no greater or no less than anywhere else in Hong Kong. In fact, in this actual Kowloon area, it's slightly better.
This is a sort of oasis in this dreadful place.
Yes, many people are quite surprised when they first come here because when they walk through the dark passageways with water dripping on them, all of a sudden you come out into this little courtyard where it's fresh air, light, and it's clean.
And you can breathe, and nothing falls on your head, and only a bit of pigeon.
True, true. In fact,
I suppose.
in fact, the buildings surrounding this courtyard have probably one of the best location in the Walled City in the sense that they have fresh air and light, whereas those in between the main road and this courtyard are what we call the sandwich class, where they've got no fresh air and no light. So these are quite desired locations.
Now, there's every sort of industry in there, in those sweatshops. They're making plastic handbags and
it's mainly
dim sum.
It's mainly low-cost type of production. Plasticware, fur, metalwork, woodwork, furniture, you name it,
and
they
food,
do.
and food in there. My blood runs cold, actually. Now, you say the police are in here and they've cleaned the place out. Well, that's as maybe. But I can't believe your health and hygiene inspectors come here very often.
They do, but we don't enforce the regulations in the Walled City. We can't do anything about improving the health conditions and the environmental conditions. And particularly with the food, because a lot of the food produced here is for lunch boxes or food or restaurants. And the people here sell to a middleman outside who then supplies, for instance, many of the factories in Sampo Kong and many of the schools.
Some of the five-star hotels, probably.
True, probably. We don't know exactly, but those serving Chu Chow food, probably many bits of delicacies come from the Walled City.
I thought there were some old ladies in here.
Oh, there probably are.
Who've never been outside the Walled City?
There are probably, but only very few.
And some of them come down for this club to have their meal and watch the television. I mean, how long does it take them to get up to the 14th floor?
Some of them tell us it takes 1 hour up and 1 hour down. More to go back up naturally because they can do about one landing every, and then they need to stop. Another landing, need to stop. Another landing, need to stop. So for them, it's an expedition.
Yet today in this awful place, there's something strange in the air. Something's happening to the most vicious, most helpless of the lost people of the walled city, the drug addicts. Drugs have always been woven into the fabric of Hong Kong. Indeed, only the acquisition of the colony in 1842 ended a war fought for the British right to supply opium to Chinese addicts, which they called foreign mud. The government was leasing out an opium farm in the 30s, and opium smoking was legal right up until 1940. So today the colony suffers from that inheritance. Each year, 42,000 local addicts use a ton of number 4 heroin, while another 130 tons is smuggled out to the world through Hong Kong. But these days, in the walled city, some of the territory's addicts are being drawn away from drugs by a few English girls and by Jesus. Twice a week, the charismatics of the St. Stephen's Society come to the walled city to counsel and to pray. Tonight they're led by 23-year-old Joanne Wilder, who knows Jesus is the answer.
Can you explain that to me?
Just that anything that we do for them won't be enough. As soon as they leave, if it wasn't for Jesus, they'd be back on drugs. Jesus means that their whole life changes, so that they don't just walk away. It's a life-changing thing. We're trying to help them through Jesus to cope with their problems, so that when problems come later in life, they'll be able to cope with them. But the most important thing is that they've got Jesus, not that they're not taking drugs anymore.
You come from Amersham.
Yeah.
Were you always going to be a Jesus lady?
No, I was always, well, I've been a Christian for a long time, but I was planning on going into business.
Into business?
Yeah.
What sort of business?
Well, I studied French at university, so I was going to go into international banking probably.
International banking. This is the place to come to.
Yeah.
But not a drug addicts clinic in the walled city.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think I suddenly realised that doing this is much more interesting than international banking.
Did you come to Hong Kong to save drug addicts and souls?
To see if I could serve the people here and bring them to know Jesus, show them love. Yeah, but not to save drug addicts.
Now, what sort of success rate do you think you have? Do you keep score?
We have 100% success rate, because even if they leave, it's Jesus that they're taking with them. And if they leave, they very, very often come back again.
Yes. If I may be personal, have you got a boyfriend?
No.
Did you have one in England?
Yeah.
So you turned your back on him and came to Jesus?
Not exactly, but I made a choice to come here and leave people behind, leave friends behind.
It's a little bit like going into a nunnery.
Well, I hope it isn't. But I had to give up some things to come. But I'm so glad I'm here now, and I know it's the right place for me to be in. So in the end, I know I haven't lost out.
I know a very tough Aussie here who said, I'm not a bit religious, but something very strange is happening there.
Well, yeah, people are being set free, totally. Lives are being completely changed. So I don't think anybody could deny that something very special is happening here. Whether you have a faith or not, you can see the results. Maybe some people would look in from the outside and think that what's happening is that people are coming off heroin, but actually for us, that's not the most important thing.
Beats international banking.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Among 140 charismatic brothers and sisters who daily pray some of Hong Kong's addicts towards a cure, are 40 young Westerners, like Anne Daly from Liverpool.
Now, Anne, you came from Liverpool. What were you doing?
Well, I was working in a hospital I was actually working in a hospital in Sheffield.
As what?
As a dietitian.
Dietitian.
That's right. That's right.
How's your diet now you're in Hong Kong?
Appalling. I tell you, it is appalling.
That's it. Why?
Well, we have all fried foods, and because we live on a very tiny island, there's no sort of fresh meat. So
this is Lantau.
Lantau Island.
Yeah.
So we eat pig fat all the time. So it's pretty appalling. Something that I really would like to get to grips with is the diet out here.
Can't you get it changed?
I think that will happen slowly, but I'm living in a different culture, and I have to accept, you know, the way of living.
Don't you have rice twice a day like everyone else?
We have rice twice a day.
Noodles?
We have noodles at breakfast time. We have macaroni at breakfast time, actually. Macaroni and tomato sauce goes down nicely.
It wouldn't do for Sheffield.
No, it wouldn't do for Sheffield.
Now, what do you do, Anne, about money here? I mean, you're not paid, obviously.
I'm not paid.
How do you support yourself?
Well, it might sound really odd, but God provides. And I think the only way I can give you an example of that is if you look in Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah 55 or 58, I'm not really quite sure. But it says that, "Come to the waters, all you are thirsty, and I will provide bread, and I will provide food without money." And I've come out here, and I don't have any church support as such, but each time I've wanted money, it's arrived, just when I've needed it.
Out of the blue?
Out of the blue, yeah, amazing. I've even had so much that I've had to give it away, which is really amazing.
I mean, what about the drug addicts in Sheffield and Liverpool? Don't they need your prayers as well?
They do need our prayers, definitely. I want to go back home. I want to go back to England because there I see a need as well, most definitely. And maybe this is just a time of training, a time of seeing, hopefully to go back and put into practice what we see here. It's just the living word. It's just the word of Jesus come true.
And the Chinese are more receptive than the Yorkshiremen?
I don't know. I've never tried to pray with Yorkshiremen. I've never tried to pray with drug addicts from the Yorkshire Dales. But I will try.
At every charismatic meeting, another half-dozen addicts arrive, longing to stop chasing the dragon, eager to believe these magical girls, desperate to give prayer a chance. When they've shown willing by attending these meetings for 8 weeks, they're taken from this dank misery to one of the Society's 5 stage houses to be looked after by Joanne and Anne and all the others. After a few weeks without heroin, they're promoted to the open Hang Fook camp, a former government resettlement area where 100 ex-addicts keep army hours and, for therapy, work at carpentry and silk screening, printing T-shirts and tablecloths. They're seeking salvation under the determined guidance of a woman from Sutton who arrived in Hong Kong 23 years ago to hand out tracts and survived by teaching the piano. Today, Jackie Pullinger is to them a sort of saviour.
When I first went to Walled City, in those days they were actually piling bodies up by the single loo, and those were people who'd OD'd in the night. And I could walk down a particular street. It's cleared now, and there's a playground, and see 100 people chasing the dragon. You know, you had to climb over their legs, and I wanted something real to offer them, not just treatment in a centre, but just as my heart has been changed, yours can be too, by a God who really loves you. And it's free, and it's miraculous, and that's really what I wanted to share, but I had no idea how to do it. So I started by trying. It was almost like attacking, actually, the people who guarded the gambling dens. They were swinging around about 2 a.m. And I went up to one, you know, and said, "Jesus loves you," and I really thought it would change his life. Of course, he wasn't at all impressed. He just said, run along, go find another victim. So I tried it on some prostitutes, and I tried it on other people, and that didn't work either. And then I found that, of course, it doesn't mean anything unless you do it. So I began to share my life and my time and my room and my rice and so on with the people there, and that impressed them.
And drug addicts have the least resistance to that message.
Well, in one sense, drug addicts are the easiest, because they know they're helpless, and I mean, most of them are willing to try anything if they're desperate. I mean, like now, the addicts that we have probably have been on heroin an average of 15 years. So they're not just young ones. They've tried everything else. They say, okay, I'll try Jesus. So of course, if he's not able to help, they'll soon find out. But they feel they've got nothing to lose.
I must say, my experience in California with the various communities there was that Jesus worked in a quite phenomenal way, almost like cold turkey. I'd never seen anything like it. And that was quite staggering.
We don't call it cold turkey because cold turkey describes the goose pimples that happen when you're going through withdrawal. But our people all pray in tongues while they're going through withdrawal, and they don't experience cold turkey. So they just, many of them have a completely pain-free withdrawal. So it's not cold turkey at all. Also, most of them feel rather warm because someone's with them all the time. And they're not convinced this is going to happen before they come in. I mean, they've been very impressed that their friend has changed, and their friend says, it's Jesus. So they say, okay, fine, I'll have Jesus. But they're not psyched into thinking that it's going to be a lovely experience. I mean, they're expecting to vomit. They've all done it in prison. They've all done it in other centres. They're expecting to suffer, so they're surprised.
True that.
Usually by about the second day, they're weeping and they say, I never felt so loved, and I'm waiting for the pain and it hasn't come yet.
The helpers then live side by side with the brothers, and that you never leave them alone.
Not for the first 4 days. Every single minute somebody's with them, like going to the loo and the shower and everything, for lots of reasons. And somebody's actually praying all that time, so they do 4-hour shifts. And some of the people who've just come off drugs, like a month before, will be the ones that sit with the new brothers. And then for 10 days they get very special treatment. They're allowed to eat whatever they like and sleep whenever they like, because all their patterns are mucked up. And then after 10 days they join the normal program, which means they've got to sleep at night and get up, and lots of worship services and swimming and exercise, and then work programs.
Most of them have criminal records, and many of them have been on drug rehabilitation schemes before.
Yes. Actually, I think we've only got one who has no previous criminal record.
So how do they seek you out? Do you go and find them, or do they come to you?
Both, but more come to find us now. I mean, in the beginning, obviously, when I was beginning in the streets, I used to go and find people. But now they come running after us. Usually it happens when somebody's met someone down a street, an old friend, and they see he's fat. And they're very impressed by fat people, because when you're on drugs, you don't eat. You don't have money and you don't have appetite. So they usually say something like, why are you so fat? And the fat one says, it's Jesus. And they say, okay, I'll have him. And where can I find him? And the fat one will say, he's in the Walled City on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I mean, this is really how it happens.
Great.
So they come in knowing nothing.
Love it.
But Jesus changed their friend. They say, okay, now where is he?
Jesus makes you fat.
And yeah.
Perfect.
And when they come into the room, one of our old brothers, one of the fat ones, or at least comparatively, will tell him how he got changed and then pray with him.
Hong Kong would seem to be a very small place for a recovering addict, because he goes back to his same flat, same haunt, same bar. Now, an old triad friend who they've known for years must be closer to them than a nice English girl who can't speak Cantonese, who can speak in tongues, nevertheless is not a replacement, surely, for that old boy they've been brought up with.
Well, the old boy they've been brought up with, they have a very strong tie to. It's not always affection. The tie is, you know, when you've joined a triad, I mean, actually, it's not so much like the mafia as like the Masons. You've joined a brotherhood and you've taken an oath, so you've got that tie, and sometimes it's a fear tie, you know, or a sort of loyalty, but not that nice a loyalty, you know. It's not because your brother's been so good to you. It's because that's what you brought up with.
You give them prayer, you give them comfort and love, but you don't give them any medication.
No, because coming off drugs through drugs is only replacing one addiction with another.
Yes. This is this methadone thing, which is almost as addictive as...
Oh, well, yes, because methadone doesn't change your heart. It merely stops an alternative drug for a while, but the craving's still there. I mean, if you don't have methadone, you're going to need heroin.
Now, heroin is very cheap here, very strong, very pure, and very available.
Very easy. I mean, almost anywhere in Hong Kong. Only take you 5 minutes. So you don't need that much amount of money, and you haven't got to rob many banks or stick very many people up or pawn very much of your mother's belongings. You know, most people can get by on 100 Hong Kong dollars a day.
How do the triads regard you? Because triads often want to make their members dependent upon drugs, do they not, so they can control them more easily?
It's not as simple as that, because triads are a brotherhood, and although some of them may make their living off drugs, that's merely one of the things that some of them do. There are whole sects of the triad society that look down on drugs completely, and then there are other ones that say opium's fine and heroin's not. So it's not as simple as people rushing around looking for victims. Many of them really do care for their members, and they hate them being on drugs. I mean, they're not good fighters, and they don't make good criminals because they're unreliable. When they found that we had a way to get people off drugs, they were rather pleased, actually began to send people to us.
But aren't you taking away their members?
Well, yeah, I had this conversation with the Walled City boss some years ago, because he said, I've tried to get my men off drugs by having them beaten up, and they actually have a man whose job is to beat up. And he says, but I can't change them. And he says, I use power and you use the heart, so I'll give you my addicts. And I said, well, no thanks, because I know that you want to give them to me so Jesus can get them off drugs and you can have them back. And use them again. But I said my whole motive for being here is to take them from you, because I think you're leading them to death.
So you didn't get him as a disciple?
Oh, yeah. But
you
that
did?
was, yes, about 15 years after, yeah. Yeah.
There's no limit to the power.
That was, well, I knew he would one day. I mean, he was just chewing it over, because he was very impressed with the way his brothers had changed. He was jealous, actually, because there was a power greater than his.
Because they got fat.
They were free. And he wasn't, you see. He had to follow his opium pipe, and he had to follow this ghastly triad thing that he'd grown up with. I mean, it's not freedom at all. He was chained to it, even though he was the boss. And he was jealous of them, who were free and happy and didn't weep at night, and were not afraid.
See, the walled city is coming down, and its worst times are over. Now, have the problems been solved, or have they merely been dispersed?
I think the problems were exacerbated by the conditions, but basically problems are because of a man's heart, or whether he likes himself, his neighbours, his friends, and his family. And of course those remain wherever you live. Otherwise, rich, educated people wouldn't have any problems, or suicides, or whatever. And of course in the States, earlier it was that most of those problems occurred amongst moneyed people. So yes, problems will continue, and they may be dispersed, but I don't think they'll be any greater than anywhere else in Hong Kong, and we're already working all over Hong Kong anyway.
Do you believe the mainland Chinese in '97 will be pleased with you, will sustain you?
I've no idea. No, I've no idea what they think.
What does your crystal ball tell you?
Oh, I don't look into a crystal ball. But I mean, everybody in Hong Kong's guessing and gambling anyway about 1997. But, you know, I don't even know whether the Chinese will admit that there are addicts at that time, or whether they'll use a similar solution to their last in dealing with them. I don't know. But, you know, we deal with all kinds of people anyway, and as long as we're allowed to remain, we will do so, and openly. And, you know, we'll be quite clear about Jesus.
Hong Kong success stories, and there's so many of them, they're always about money. Yours, it seems to me, is about goodness. I think you're an all-round good egg.
Not good. Jesus said, who's good? If it weren't for him, I would have no goodness at all. But it's true that in Hong Kong, everything's about money and success and striving and pushing. And my observation was that there were many, many people who, because others were successful, because of the pushing, fell off the pile. Or some of them jumped off it, said, I don't choose to be part of this. And for them, there was no second chance. They were casualties because of Hong Kong's success. And those are the ones that I wanted to help, because we've got a message of hope for them.
May I ask you a crafty one, a naughty one? Why haven't you got married?
That's not crafty or naughty. The Americans ask it all the time. So I suppose you could ask God.
You settle for God. It's like,
it's
like becoming a nun.
No,
it's a nun in jeans.
It's absolutely not like becoming a nun. I've settled for whatever he has, you know. I mean, still hope.
Well, you look pretty happy to me.
It's a miracle, but then I bank my life on a miracle.